Welcome, everybody, to this week's episode of Embracing Authentic. I'm Marissa. I'm joined here by Janelle, Jermaine, and our guest, Ellen. This week's episode of Embracing Authentic is Silent but Harmful: How Microaggressions and Bias Shape Corporate Culture. I know this is a discussion that we're really looking forward to, but we just wanted to lead this off with just some quick definitions of exactly what a microaggression is, who it affects, and how people may feel when they hear a microaggression used against them. So I did a little bit of research before we jumped into this conversation. So I got this definition of a microaggression from Psychology Today. And it says a microaggression is the everyday verbal, nonverbal, and environmental slights, snubs, or insults, whether intentional or unintentional, which communicate hostile, derogatory, or negative messages to target persons based solely on their marginalized group membership. And then Psychology Today also added that in many cases, these hidden messages may invalidate the group identity or experiential reality of targeted persons, demean them on a personal or group level, communicate they are lesser human beings, suggest they do not belong to the majority group, threaten and intimidate, or relegate them to inferior status and treatment. So I know when I was thinking about microaggressions, I immediately went to race, and I could only think of race. But Ellen brought to my attention that it's not, microaggressions aren't just about race. So I thought the definition that Psychology Today put together hit really well on any targeted person that is of any marginalized group. So whether that be race, gender, sexual orientation, somebody's religion, or their disability. So I thought it was interesting, and just so we could set the stage for our conversation, to show that microaggressions can come in all shapes and sizes. So with that, Janelle, I'm going to hand it over to you to introduce our guest.
All right, so I have the pleasure of welcoming Ellen. She's our latest Prospero employee, a new clinical director. So Ellen, go ahead and introduce yourself and let us know, why did you sign up to even be a part of this episode?
Okay. So I'm Ellen. I am the clinical director in Wisconsin. My background is in hospice and palliative care, as well as I was an attorney for 15 years in between sort of being a nurse. So I'm I have a very wide-ranging background. Um, and I signed up to talk on this podcast because throughout my career, I have both seen and experienced the just the multitude of ways that microaggressions can affect individuals and groups and how they can really poison a culture. Um, and I think it's really important to talk about these things so that they're identifiable, both by people who are suffering as a result of them and by people who might be unintentionally um, causing microaggressions, or I don't know how you say it. Yeah. Anyway, creating microaggressions in their speech or in the way that they manage people or the way they interact with people from day to day. So I can pull examples from my attorney days as well as from all of my nursing days. And I think it's a really important subject to talk about.
Absolutely. Do you find that most of the time microaggressions are unintentional. A lot of times when I hear microaggression, it's people saying, "Oh, well, I didn't mean anything by it. it it's just how I grew up," or something usually comes along with it. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that sometimes it is unintentional. I think that, people get a pass maybe the first time. Um, but I think that once someone has been informed that whatever they're saying or doing is unacceptable to the person or group that's receiving it, I think that, they don't get a pass anymore. I mean, we're grown-ups. Um, I think kids actually are probably better at not creating microaggression than we are. Um, and so yeah, I think sometimes it's unintentional, but I think much of the time it's intentional. And I think that I was just kidding, I was being sarcastic, um, those kinds of things that are said are excuses to not really own what their how their behavior is affecting others. So, my experience has been both ways. Most of the time, I believe that it's intentional. Most of the time, I think that people have um, lived their lives and formed their relationships based on who they are. And I think that part of who they are often is the person that's saying the thing that's hurting people.
Right. You
So
mentioned
I
the
don't know.
word poison. You mentioned the word poisonous, and it is poison to the culture. But I want you to elaborate a little bit more on that. Maybe share an example of why you think microaggressions are poisonous to the workplace.
Sure, I think starting out, I think they're insidious.
Mhm.
So, like when it's first encountered, someone will say, "I was just kidding," and you'll be like, "Okay." And it's the same as any kind of abuse. I think that it starts out sort of, um, you think, "Oh, that was not cool," or, "I wish they wouldn't act that way." And in increments, you start to accept things as normal. And I think that many of us can relate to that given the current political climate. So, Jermaine, like, I mean, it has. I don't want to get political, except that I am, um, but I think that the constant barrage of, um, "Oh, I was just kidding," and things like that. I think that we really do have an example in our president of someone who not only is microaggressive but is macroaggressive. So, but from my own experience, I the best example I can give is I worked. I was the clinical director of operations for a hospice for almost 8 years, and I reported to an executive director in the early part of that 8 years, who was, you know, expert at using microaggression to control people and to um, make himself look really good. So, it started off with things like slamming the door when someone would leave his office, or he had a whack-a-mole um, thing in his office. And if he got mad, knowing that everybody could hear, he'd start pounding on that whack-a-mole. And
Really?
the excuse is, yeah, the excuse is, "Oh, I'm just blowing off steam." But the clear message is, he's mad, everybody better get in line. And it was so, those kinds of smaller I mean, they sound outrageous to me now, but at the time, because it was so insidious, that seemed like a small thing. He wasn't screaming at anybody, he was just doing this, hanging the phone up really loudly, or swearing in his office really loudly, or doing the whack-a-mole or things like that. And that eventually progressed to him, um, can't even believe this happened, but him standing next to me, over me, with his hands in the form of a gun pointing at my head, saying, "There's a target on your back."
Wow. I can just
Wow.
imagine the energy if it was an office environment, that the energy in there was just like unbearable at some points with him in his office just spouting off or just shooting off. I could just, I mean, wow.
Yeah.
And for him to stand next to you, oh my goodness.
Yeah, he said, "It's either you or me."
Wow. So how did you handle those situations, especially the last one that you mentioned?
Well, so not very well. I've reflected a lot on that whole 3 years, and fortunately have learned from it. So the first time around with that situation, I didn't speak up. I didn't recognize until it was very far along exactly what all of that was creating. Um, Fortunately, there was someone else in the room during that last incident who immediately left the room and called our national HR representative. Fortunately, someone else intervened on my behalf, and that's the other thing that I think is really important is um, taking someone aside who you see has been the receiver of a microaggression and saying, "Look, that was not cool. What are you okay with that?" Or pointing out or affirming that that was an ugly thing to do or an ugly thing to say, and um, you know, making it known to the person that's doing it that it's unacceptable. So that's one of my examples. So
Well, there's a heavy example, man.
Yeah. Yeah, wow.
Wow.
I think it's important also to we were talking about protected groups, and I think that anybody who's made other is subject to all of this, right? So it can be a visible physical characteristic, like gender or skin color. It can be or the way someone dresses. Um, it can be a disability, but it can also be any group within a corporate culture that someone has decided is outside or not as good or on the list, being watched or whatever it is. Um, so, I mean, it can apply to, there's so many layers to it. It's just, but I think recognizing that it's insidious is really, really important.
Mm, definitely. Thinking that it is so insidious and it's so toxic, why do we, I think human nature is to say, well, maybe they didn't mean it that way, or maybe I'm blowing it up. Maybe I just misunderstood what they meant and we let it go. And then it happens again. And now we're upset because now we've okayed this continuum of this behavior.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, that's a great way to put it as being insidious, right? Like
Right.
we accepted it the first time, or we didn't internally accept it, but we didn't externally object to it.
Right.
And then, it moves on. I mean, sexual harassment is the same way. That's a form of microaggression. I have another experience working for a different hospice that the bereavement coordinator, um, oh, this is really, uh, so the bereavement coordinator, he and I shared some interests in photography and nature photography and things like that. And so we talked about stuff like that. I talked to him about my parents' house in northern Wisconsin and things. And um, months down the road, my dad died, and So this guy was our bereavement coordinator, or he was a chaplain and a bereavement counselor. And he came into my cubicle and, sat down very close. There's not a lot of room in a cubicle. You guys know that, right? So sat down sort of next to me, facing me, took my hand and put my hand on his groin area.
Check, please. I'm gonna go ahead and leave now. Are you serious?
Yeah. And held it and said, if you ever need to talk, right?
He's using his position of power in a sense. He's here to help and assist, but not in the way that he's getting paid to.
And probably
Right.
that's how it goes a lot. I mean, the abuse of power,
Mhm.
and the person that's being abused usually is frightened of the retaliation of coming forth and saying something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I
Wow.
So
agree.
how do you get the courage to say something the first time something happens without fear of facing any sort of retaliation?
I'm not sure well, part of it is, I think, the culture. So in that situation, I went directly to the CEO of the hospice because I knew she was a woman and I knew she would not tolerate that. And he was gone the next day.
Okay.
So, I mean, but I think that so it's a culture that helps people to respond in the way they need to. But I think also, so I've learned from my daughter, who is quite the force of nature, um, that if someone says something to you that you perceive to be anything other than genuine or anything other than kind or honest or whatever it is, just say, hey, did you mean I did you really just say that blah blah, whatever it is? And because if you did, that's not really, I don't accept that, you know? So like reflect back to them what they said and say how you feel about it. Um and but not saying, you're a racist off the top of your head, or because that's what I think, even though we should be able to say that, like I said before, giving sort of people a little bit of a pass on the first time through, but kind of tagging it as, hey, I noticed what you just did. And even if you
Absolutely.
give me a bogus explanation right now, you know now that I know
That
what you're
I know,
doing.
and I'm gonna
Calling
Right.
it
let
out
you
and bringing
know
it to
that
their
I
attention.
know.
Yes.
Yep,
Yeah.
Yes.
absolutely. Yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly. Because calling people racist when if they say racist things, it's immediate wall up, immediate defense. But saying, "Hey, I didn't appreciate the way that you said that. Maybe next time try using these words instead." Um, is a better way to approach situations like that, because just them knowing that what they said isn't something that you'll accept is enough in most situations.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, Yeah, it's tricky. It's really tricky. I had an experience when I was in law school. I interviewed for a clerkship with a Supreme Court justice in Wisconsin. And during the interview, he said to me, this is just the anyway. I mean, I'm sure you guys have stories too. It's just you look back on it and you think, wow. So he started talking about his son and told me that his son lived in Alaska where the ratio of men to women was 2 to 1. And he thought maybe I should meet his son because he thought I would really like him, right? In Alaska. I'm in Wisconsin, right? Then he also said, um, you know, uh, he was talking about he liked to use paper. He didn't like to use computers to take notes. I mean, this was back in a while ago. Um,
No numbers now. No numbers.
He said, "But, of course, you could just sit on my lap and take notes for me."
Wait. Pause.
This was during an interview?
Mhm.
I'm
A Supreme
Wow.
Court justice.
so, again, that abuse of power.
Right, exactly. Imbalance. Yep.
And
Yeah.
I want to ask you, like, because you said you were a lawyer at one point, what type of microaggression did you experience as a woman lawyer?
Oh, man. I mean, ugh. And I was in litigation. So, that's a man's world. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Um, I mean, constant comments, even from judges about, y- women wear skirts in my courtroom. That was in Alabama. Yeah.
Oh my
Um,
God.
Did you say there you go?
Well, you know what?
Oh,
I just read Just Mercy,
oh,
and I'm like, Alabama. Oh my gosh.
I
oh
worked
my
with
God.
Brian Stevenson was my boss.
Oh my God, that is amazing. I
Yeah, I
watched the
worked.
movie and I read the book like just a few weeks ago. And reading that book, the first 5 chapters, it took me a few days to get through it because it was so powerful. I learned new things I didn't know. I didn't know, about slavery and the Jefferson Davis Day. It was still a thing there. So that's amazing that you worked with Brian.
I
Right.
worked with him for 6 years.
Oh my
At
God.
So
EJI.
yeah, well, it started out as the Federal Death Penalty Resource Center, and
Hmm.
then all the funding was pulled in what year was it? 94. And but he had the foresight to create a nonprofit, so then it became EJI. Yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, constant and with him. I remember walking into a restaurant, talk about microaggression. I remember walking into a restaurant, and he was standing, I mean, shoulder to shoulder with me, right here. And the hostess said to me, "Table for one."
Yeah.
I said, no, we're together. I mean, just
It is something about the South that just the culture, the dynamic. If you're, I don't know how to best say it politically correctly, but you can just still feel this essence of you're not welcome, depending on how you look. I used to work for a law firm when I was in college, and it was a family law firm. All of them were Caucasian. I'm the only African American, and but I was good at what I did. I was basically like a paralegal by the time that I learned all of the things that I need to know. And this lady called and said, "I want to speak to the colored girl that's handling my case." I answered the phone and I was like, "Excuse me?" And she said, "I want to speak to the colored girl that handles my case." And I said, "Well, there's no one colored here, so you may have the wrong number."
Like you're the red or the blue person in the
right,
office.
exactly.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
I
I
And
have
mean,
this was in
never heard
Mississippi.
that. I've never heard that term at least used towards me or really from anybody. So that it amazes me that you heard that because you're not
Yeah.
much older than I am.
I
So
know. Same
it's
law firm, and people would come in and they're like, "Oh, you're not black, are you?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I am." They're like, "Oh, well, you got to be mixed. Your mom must be white." No, we come from two African American parents. I don't go out in the sun much.
Could that be the reason?
I'm
Nah,
not
I'm
an
kidding.
outside person. I mean,
I mean, this time of year I'm a little bit lighter than
I'm a
most
little
people,
pale
but
when it comes to this season, to be honest. I lose my color in the fall and winter. So,
so I had a judge one time, or not a judge. It was I was in a hearing in Mobile, Alabama, and his stenographer. Oh my God, oh, I mean, the so the South isn't bad. Let's just get that clear. I mean, there are some very progressive, wonderful people in the South. However, there is a very strong, and I wouldn't even say lingering, I would say vibrant um, racist community in the South. And it's nowhere more apparent than in um, the courts.
Mm,
Um, so I was getting ready for a hearing in Mobile, Alabama, and my client was African American man, and my co-counsel was an African American woman. And um, so my client was pretty obvious. He was in shackles, right? He was a death row person, and he was in shackles in an orange jumpsuit. But the clerk of courts came up to my co-counsel and said to her, "You can't be up here. You're going to have to sit in the audience." And, right? And I said, "Excuse me?" She said, "We can't have people up here that aren't attorneys." And I said, "She's an attorney, just like me." Yeah,
Assuming that
so just the
because she
assumption,
was Black,
right,
right? So just the
she
assumption that she
wouldn't.
was black and that she was a woman.
right,
There's no
Surely
way
she
she
cannot
could
be
be
qualified.
right.
right. And the other thing that happens, I think, talk about. I mean, we're getting a little away from corporate culture, but the same kind of microaggression things happen um, to African American defendants in criminal courts um, as a result of prosecutors and judges saying, just about anything they want to say from the bench or from their position of authority. So I was in the middle of questioning the mother of my client about uh, the abuses that she had suffered while she was pregnant with my client, and about some sexual violence, generational sexual violence that had occurred in their family. And the judge interrupted me and and said, "I'm not going to do my imitation of him. I'm just going to say, do you want some coffee?" And um, my client declined, and I said, "No, thank you, Your Honor." And then the attorney for my client, the former attorney for my client, said he would like some. He also was African American. Judge said, "How do you like it?" And the attorney said just cream and sugar. No, wait, he said just sugar. And the judge said in open court, "Ah, sweet, black, and hot, just like you like your women, huh?" And I was standing there, and I mean, that is the only time in my life that I can say, like, the the room was spinning. Like, I was so disoriented by that. This was 1998 in the United States of America, in a courtroom, and a judge who had been on the bench for over 30 years said that.
I feel like inappropriate isn't even a good
It
enough
doesn't touch the
term
surface.
for that. I
Yeah,
can't believe that.
yeah. So I mean, it's everywhere. But getting back to the corporate part, I think we all have a responsibility to call it out when it happens. And if it's not directed at us, I think it's even easier for us to then call it out. You know, I
Absolutely.
Yeah, so like the first example I gave, I wasn't able to respond appropriate. I was sitting there in a chair sobbing, but someone else called it out. And that's important. I think it's incumbent on all of us to do that.
I think
So,
having those silent heroes, those people that are speaking up for you, makes you feel better and stronger to speak up and say something. I've
yeah.
had instances at Prospero where I was afraid to say something, and the people that saw were like, "That's not right," immediately. And I talked about it with them, and I was like, "You know what? If I process it and I still feel a way tomorrow, I'll address it." And I
Mhm.
did that. and we moved on, and there's not been any issues. But I think had I just said, it's okay, I would have forever harbored these negative feelings towards this person.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a whole process. It's. I mean, I'm sure it's constant every day, right? Sometimes you got to pick your battles, but in a work environment, I think that it's important to really stand up for yourself. You know.
It's, yeah, because you have to be comfortable at work. I mean, if it's a place where you spend at least what 8 to 10 hours a day, I mean, you're basically at work as much as you are at home sometimes. So
Yeah.
just imagine how comfortable you are at home when you come home. I mean, I still feel you should have that same level at work as well. You should still be comfortable at work. So if someone at work is making you uncomfortable, by all means, I suggest speaking up.
Yeah, I agree. So tell me, can I ask you guys a question?
Sure.
Absolutely.
Bring them on.
So how do you deal with the constant um just the barrage of stuff that gets thrown your way by society and by individuals every day? Like how do you I mean, I know is that a dog behind you?
You see, you took the words right out of my
Oh,
mouth. I didn't
I'm
want to say anything. The
sorry.
way he was looking, he was
I
like, "I'm waiting on
usually
somebody to ask
shut
me
the
a question.
It's
door.
my turn too.
I'm waiting on someone to ask me a question." I wasn't gonna say anything.
I'm
I can
sorry.
I can never see because I'm like looking at just you guys and I can never
Yeah.
see what's behind me and people will just be like, "Hey, I don't know if you can see this, but your dog's behind you." I'm like, "Oh,
How
great."
adorable. Anyway, so like I mean, I guess asking for the same, examples or thoughts about sort of how to maintain your strength and how to keep that well filled um in the face of the constant, you know, like I said, barrage of negativity that comes your way every day. Anybody?
Please. Who's gonna go
I'll,
first?
I'll say, go ahead, Jermaine.
Okay. Well, I mean, me personally, I look at it like because I look at it like this. I mean, Janelle, you can attest to this. I mean, this is me all day long. So I try to fill my cup up in the morning with as much positive energy as possible because I feel like I feel like my team will feed off of my energy.
Hmm.
So if I'm full of positive energy, even when they're negative, then hopefully it'll spill over to them, and because they'll have whether it's work related or whether it's personal, it still kind of bleeds into work, and I still have to take in what they give because sometimes it's like you're a supervisor and you're a counselor too, because they may have other issues going on, and sometimes it's hard to turn the switch off when you come to work because of the issues that you have outside of work. So I mean, I try to stay as positive and full of energy as possible because I know that I'm going to get one person who is going to be down that day, and you never know. I might crack a joke or say something or do something, and it makes them smile, and that little bit of light that they get from the smile or laughter that I gave them might just sway their day into a better day. You know, even if it is for the 8 hours that they're at work with me.
Mm.
So that's kind of what I do. I try to just always be positive. I mean, I have my stuff going on outside of work too, but I feel like I have to. I feel like that I do put on and bring this energy with me, this positive energy with me, so my team can at least take some of that.
Thank you.
Hey, Marcy.
Marissa.
Well, um I I have to admit I'm exhausted all the time. Just just from what's going on in the United States, I won't even say in the world. In the United States, it's exhausting seeing people fight for something that we've been fighting for 400 years. It takes a toll, and it's exhausting seeing people that look like your family being killed, and there's a constant feeling of heavy weight on at least my shoulders, trying to, I guess, put a positive light on what Black people are doing. It's like I'm going to work every day. I work in healthcare. I have my master's. I'm doing all of these great things, and I'm a Black person. Like, I'm doing all of these good things. Like, don't think that Black people are bad, even though you shouldn't anyways, because it doesn't matter if even even Black people or other people of color that may not have grown up in a great situation, and they may be be part of a gang or have committed a crime. They don't deserve to live any less than me working at Prospero.
Mhm.
So it's exhaustion is my kind of constant. I do try my hardest to be positive, but some days it's really hard.
Yeah.
Um, so that's kind of how I deal with things, but I have a really good support system, and um, things like this do help me. Just talking about what's going on and how to get through the harder days and how to confront issues. It's really helpful to discuss those things. And me being introverted, I'm not used to doing that. It's usually something that I keep inside until something small happens, and then I'm just like, here's
Yeah.
all of my feelings that I've been holding on to
Right.
for 6 months. Like, you're gonna have it because you dropped my ice cream cone, you know? So it helped. This has been really helpful for me, and being part of Prosperity has been really helpful to have an outlet, because social media is exhausting.
Oh,
Um, and
yes.
it gosh, I need to delete all that because it's exhausting, you
Media
know?
is exhausting.
Yeah.
Everything's exhausting. Yeah, I think it's really sad when you have to, and sort of in a, I mean, this applies in any situation. It's sad when you have to not engage in actively listening or learning because of all the bad stuff that happens around it, you know?
Mhm.
I mean, the same thing could be said in a work environment, right? You have to protect yourself emotionally by shutting down, but then you don't get to experience what you're all the the wonders that could be, you know? Yeah.
Yeah,
To kind
absolutely.
of encourage what Jermaine and Marissa said, I'm a generally optimistic person. I'm always bubbly and cheery, like I'm on. But when I come home or I shut this computer off, I turn off. Like I am introverted. I'm quiet. I don't want to talk to friends, family, anybody for at least like an hour because the world is exhausting. I go scroll mindlessly on Facebook, but it's to watch like cooking videos and, oh, cool, they made a statue out of chocolate because I have to decompress because
Yeah.
I am talking all the time. And then education is a big part of just who I am. So I'm thankful that we have this opportunity to use prosperity to educate and lend our voices to helping other people understand. But it is also very exhausting when, for a case in point, to get somewhat political, like watching the presidential debate and seeing that our own president won't stand up against the things that are already wrong with this world. So it is just, it's disheartening because to Marissa's point, I have a master's, I have a bachelor's, I went to school, I went to private school, I'm doing well for myself, all of these things. But then in another light, it makes us seem like the token because, oh, Obama did it, Michelle did it, Oprah did it, you're doing it. Why are your people like that not able to do it if you did it? Black on black crime, the
Well,
whole
that's
theory of that, that's not a thing. It's
No,
just
it's not.
not because people commit crimes, people committing crimes, not black on black. So this whole construct, this whole society, just this whole society that we're in right now is draining. I get kind of anxious when I see the police drive by because no, I didn't do anything wrong. But neither did some of the hashtags that we have right now. Breonna Taylor was asleep in her bed. My cousin actually was her ex-boyfriend, Jamarcus Glover. And they tried to make him say that she was guilty, even though she had nothing to do with whatever he had going on. So these things touch me on a daily basis, and I may not ever say anything. People don't know that struggle, that burden that you're carrying to work to put on that happy face and fill up somebody else's cup. So it is exhausting, to say the least.
yeah. Yeah, I agree. And I think it's important to remember, I mean, Jermaine, you were saying people have stuff going on outside of work, and I think it's also important to recognize when people are maybe seeming a little off or a little down or whatever, maybe there's something going on at work that they don't feel like they can talk about, or they feel isolated, or they feel excluded or targeted. Um, I think it's important to, like I said before, everybody needs to watch out for each other. You know, it's the only way
Especially
you
at
can
work.
build a good culture. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I'm
It's
sorry, Jermaine, I
definitely
talked over you.
No, you're okay. I was saying I'm just agreeing with you, especially at
Oh,
work. I mean,
yeah.
we're all a team. We're all a team, and here we all have the same goal, and that's to take care of the patient. I
Mhm.
mean, that's our goal. And as far as I'm concerned, being on a team means I just explained this. I just said this in an interview today. I mean, we the culture that we're building here is that we are a team. We are a family. So if someone falls, then it should be multiple hands there to pick him up or pick her up. So
Yep.
I just, that's just how I feel about it.
Marissa, you were gonna say something.
No, I was just gonna say that it should be a see something, say something, and I know that that's a phrase that's used very, very often. But when we're talking about microaggressions in particular, like it might be easy for the person that's hearing it to say like, oh, it's just a one-time thing, like I'll just brush it off. But if you if you hear something and you feel uncomfortable hearing it and it's not directed towards you, then imagine the person that's hearing it firsthand,
Mhm.
and they might brush it off. But I think it's our job as their coworkers to jump in, and it doesn't have to be a confrontation. It can be a simple Teams message saying, "Hey, I noticed you said this. Like I don't think it was I don't think you meant anything by it, but here's my feelings on it. Maybe just use something different next time." And
Mhm.
usually the person doesn't mean anything by it, I would hope, but it's a chance to educate.
Yeah.
And I think it's important that we do that for each other,
Yeah.
because if everybody's letting things kind of be swept under the rug, then you build this big dirt mound under a rug eventually. Um, and then that's what your corporate culture is.
Yeah.
So now that we have the opportunity to build a great culture where we defend our fellow coworker when we don't think things are right, we should absolutely do that. Like this is an opportunity that I'm sure a lot of us have never had before. So like
Right.
this is exciting. Like we can build something great where people feel super comfortable coming into work and they're excited to do it.
Yeah, I agree. I think also as managers, we have to understand that often it's really hard to articulate just exactly what it was that was that was the microaggression. Like, because like it's the insidious part again. You can't even really describe what it was. That if I had gone to my executive director's boss, and this is part of the corporate culture there, and said, I feel threatened because he's doing whack-a-mole in his office, his boss would have been like, "Ah, come on. Really?"
Yeah, it
And
sounds almost ridiculous when you say it
right.
like that, but
Right, but I think we have to look beyond the this is what was said to the context it was said in, and to what other things could have, you know, or done, said or done. Um, what other meanings could be ascribed to what they were doing other than just, oh, I was just playing whack-a-mole? Like, who does that? Really?
right. So how do you recommend that our management team handle an employee approaching them to discuss a microaggression? And I guess that can
Um,
be for both you and Jermaine, given your positions.
I'm sorry, just a second. There. I apologize. Um, for me, I think it's really important to listen, not to the words, but pick up on what the emotion is, and not be dismissive ever if someone's approaching you with something like that, because you know that it's important to them. If so, I think dismissing it out of hand is a huge mistake. I think exploring what they felt was uh, inappropriate, or aggressive, or even violent, if you don't understand it. I mean, certain things you understand right away, right? But some things it takes a little more digging to really understand. But I think that the words are almost never going to be enough to understand what's going on. Jermaine, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, you never want to downplay. If they took the time to come to you to address an issue, then by all means give them that same energy back and listen to them. Try to put yourself in their position, because if they felt uncomfortable, then that's a problem. So you want to take the moment to absorb every detail that they tell you. I mean, pay close attention. Look at the gestures on their body. Look at the emotion in their face,
Hmm.
because at this point they're looking at you for help. So that's a part of our role, is to help. I mean, they have questions about the job all day. So now they got a real question. They have a real personal question. And I feel that dismissing or downplaying how they feel will destroy the connection between you and that employee.
Hmm.
And you plant a bad seed, and that bad seed could possibly bleed over into other employees. And now you're going to look at a morale issue, and your
Hmm.
morale will start to drop. So it plays it. I mean, it can spiral out into a big whirlwind. If you don't handle that situation, it's a delicate situation. So you have to handle it very hands on. You
Hmm.
know, turn to HR. That would be always my thing. Turn to HR. I mean, sometimes we'll probably go to another manager, and another manager or another supervisor may be like, okay, well, it probably wasn't that important, or they're probably blowing it out of proportion. No, I don't want to hear that, because they came to me and it's an issue for them. So now it's an issue for me. So I'm going to go to HR.
Yeah.
So,
How do we portray that kind of, this is a safe place to people? How do we build that culture in an organization?
actions on top of our words. I mean, we can't just say it. We have to do it. We have to show them that, hey, look, this is what you're saying. This is what I'm gonna do, and then follow through with it.
Mm.
So the follow through is what's gonna. I feel it's gonna build that culture is our follow through, our actions, not just our words, but our actions.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
I always say I'm from the show me state, so you gotta show me. Your actions speak louder than words.
Absolutely. Well, I think this has been a great conversation. Ellen, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it. Jermaine, I know you're gonna close us out, but I wanted to extend my thank you to you, Ellen.
And that's perfect. I want to thank her too. It was a great conversation. Great conversation.
Thank you, and I appreciate the opportunity, and I hope this can be an ongoing conversation. If there are things that I can offer to you and the group, please. I've learned a lot from talking to you guys, so thank you so much for that. I appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, to all of our listeners, the resources that we use today will be on Flow. So you can go to Flow and pull those resources there. Our next episode will be Age Isn't Just a Number, Age-Based Bias. So please, please, if you if you want to submit anything, you will go to Flow to submit yourself. If you want to be a guest on the show, then please go ahead and submit the form on Flow. So
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. I hope you have a good rest of your week, and we will talk again soon.
Sounds
Okay,
great.
bye
Thank you, guys.
everybody.
Thanks,
bye bye.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye.